He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't need to come by anymore, Dad. Bruno barks every time you show up." Bruno. His dog. A rescue mutt that had lived in that house for barely a year. I built that porch he was standing on. Painted those walls. Paid for every tile under his kitchen floor. But now, I was being asked not to visit, because the dog didn't like me. Not a fight. Not a falling out. Just dismissed, like some unwanted noise. That was the day I realized I had been replaced. I remember the first time I held my son, Matthew. He came into this world screaming, fists balled, face red like fire, and I laughed through the tears. His mother, Marjorie, was already fading by then. Cancer had taken its grip too early, too cruelly. She only got to hold him once before slipping into that long sleep. From that moment, it was just the two of us. Father and son. My entire world was wrapped in that tiny body I cradled in my arms. I swore I'd never let him feel like something was missing. I'd be his father and his mother, his roof and his foundation. We lived in a modest little house on Birch Lane, the one I eventually gave to him. It was small, but it was ours. I built half of it with my own hands, learning as I went. The nights I spent sanding floorboards, patching up leaks, installing cabinets, all while rocking Matthew to sleep between shifts, I wore those years like armor. I didn't mind. Not once. My hands were always busy, but my heart was always with him. I'd wake up before the sun, work construction all day, come home and help with homework, cook dinner, then fall asleep on the couch with the TV humming and his head on my chest. Those were the best years of my life, even if they were the hardest. Every Sunday, we'd go to the diner 2 towns over, the pancake place, he called it. He'd get blueberry pancakes, no syrup, and I'd drink my coffee black, just like Marjorie liked hers. We'd sit in the same booth, next to the window that looked out at the park. He always pressed his face to the glass and pointed out the dogs running around outside. He loved them even back then. Funny how that turned out. Matthew was a bright, kind boy. He'd offer his sandwich to another kid if theirs fell. He'd climb trees barefoot and bring me rocks he swore were fossils. He'd cry if he stepped on a bug by accident. Sensitive. Gentle. I was proud of that. Still am, if I'm being honest. As he grew, I did my best to prepare him for the world. I taught him how to fix a leaking faucet, how to change a tire, how to stand tall but stay humble. We had a ritual. Every night before bed, I'd say, "Remember, you're stronger than yesterday." And he'd reply, "Because you made me that way, Dad." He used to write me little notes and leave them under my pillow. "Thanks for dinner. You're the best dad. I want to be like you." I kept every single one in a shoebox in my closet. I still have it. I don't open it much anymore. I didn't date after Marjorie passed. People told me I should, that I was still young, that I deserved love. Maybe they were right. But I had a promise to keep. Raising Matthew wasn't a chore, it was an honor. I'd look at him and see her. Her eyes. Her crooked smile. And every time he laughed, it was like I was hearing Marjorie again. The teenage years were rougher, as they always are. He grew quiet, spent more time in his room, started locking the door. We had our arguments, about school, about friends, about him wanting to be his own man. But even through slammed doors and missed curfews, I never doubted he loved me. When he graduated high school, I cried like a baby in the bleachers. He hugged me after the ceremony and whispered, "You did it, Dad." Not "I did it." He said "you." Like he knew just how hard I worked to get him there. He went off to college on a scholarship. I packed his car myself. He hugged me tight before he left. I stood in the driveway waving until the car disappeared down the street. That was the first night the house felt too quiet. But I was proud. So damn proud. The phone calls came less often over the years. Then just texts. Then sometimes, nothing at all. I chalked it up to adulthood, work, responsibility, building a life. I told myself that was a good thing. It meant I raised him to be independent. Isn't that what all parents want? When he met his wife, Sarah, he called me with excitement in his voice. "She's amazing, Dad. You'll love her." I believed him. I wanted to. I remember buying a new shirt for that dinner, brushing my hair back, putting on cologne I hadn't worn in years. She was polite. Smiled a lot. But her eyes scanned my house like she was sizing it up. She didn't ask about Marjorie's photo on the mantel. Didn't ask me much at all. Still, I tried. Invited them over, offered to help with their wedding, gave them the house on Birch Lane as a gift, the one I built with my hands. He didn't ask for it. I just wanted him to have a strong foundation, like I tried to give all his life. Looking back, I think that's when things started to shift. When I handed over the deed. When I let go of the house, I think I let go of something else too. A piece of respect. A piece of me. But at the time, I thought I was just being a good father. I believed in giving. In selflessness. I still do. I just didn't know it would come at the cost of being forgotten. At first, it was subtle. Small things. Things you could brush off if you weren't paying close attention, and maybe I wanted to brush them off. I told myself it was normal, that sons grow into their own lives, that boundaries change as time goes on. But deep down, something was changing. I noticed it the first time I showed up at their house, my old house, the one I gave them, without calling ahead. Matthew opened the door just a crack, as if I were some door-to-door salesman. "Hey, Dad," he said, barely moving to let me in. Bruno, the dog, barked wildly behind him, straining on his leash. Sarah peeked from the kitchen and offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You should probably call first," she said, not unkindly, but not kindly, either. I laughed, trying to play it off. "What, do I need a reservation now?" Matthew didn't laugh. He looked down at the dog. "He gets real anxious when the doorbell rings. Throws off his whole day." It seemed silly at the time, the dog had anxiety. But I didn't want to make trouble. I nodded, stepped back, said I'd try another time. I remember walking back to my truck, pausing at the edge of the driveway, and looking back at the house. The paint had faded a little. The shutters I hung myself were still there. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. The next few visits were shorter. Sarah would often stay in the other room. Matthew would check his phone mid-conversation. And Bruno? Bruno was king of the castle. They talked to him more than they talked to me. "He's our baby," Sarah said once, cooing at the dog while I sat there sipping coffee. "We don't plan on having kids, too much going on in the world. But this guy? He's all we need." Matthew nodded, rubbing the dog's ears. "He's got such a soul, Dad. Like, you can see it in his eyes." I stared at him for a long second. "You used to say that about your mother's portrait." He blinked, then shrugged. "Well, people change. Maybe they do." What I couldn't quite ignore, though, were the ways they'd begin to treat me, like I was an inconvenience rather than a guest. I'd bring over soup in the winter, and Sarah would say, "Oh, thanks. We don't really do canned stuff." I made that soup from scratch. Took me 3 hours. One time, I brought a framed photo of Marjorie, the one where she's sitting on the porch swing, pregnant and smiling, and I offered it to them for their hallway. Matthew took it with a polite smile but never hung it up. I found it weeks later sitting on the garage shelf, half buried under a toolbox and a leash. And Bruno. Bruno was everywhere. No room was off limits. He ate from handmade ceramic bowls and had his own corner of the living room, complete with a doggy couch. I'm not exaggerating. A couch. For a dog. At dinner, they'd feed him bits of meat from their plates while I sat quietly, watching them speak in baby voices to an animal that didn't even know I existed. And whenever I tried to speak, to share a story, or ask about their jobs, someone would interrupt. Or the dog would bark. Or they'd excuse themselves to check something. One afternoon, I offered to help Matthew with yard work. Just to spend time with him. We used to garden together when he was younger, pulling weeds, planting tomatoes, laughing when the hose sprayed one of us. But now? I've got a guy who handles all that, he said. Besides, Bruno doesn't like the sound of the mower. I stood there holding my gloves, unsure what to do. You sure you don't need a hand? He patted my shoulder, like a stranger trying to politely move someone along. It's fine, Dad. Go relax. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing Marjorie's voice in my head, from when we first brought Matthew home. He'll always need you, she'd whispered, even when he thinks he doesn't. But what if she was wrong? The worst moment came a few weeks later. It was my birthday, my 74th. I didn't expect a party or gifts. Just a dinner. A small thing. I even wore a tie. I hadn't worn one in years. When I knocked on the door, no one answered. I knocked again. Then I tried calling. Finally, Matthew picked up. Oh shoot, he said, I thought we said next weekend. No, I said, heart already sinking. You said the 12th. Today's the 12th. There was a long pause. Then laughter in the background. Sarah's voice. Plates clinking. Look, Dad, we've got friends over. It's kind of a dog thing. Bruno's trainer came by. Maybe we can reschedule. A dog thing. A dog thing. I told him not to worry about it. Said I'd grab a burger on the way home. He apologized in that empty, distracted way people do when they just want to end a call. I sat in the parking lot of a diner for 20 minutes before I went inside. Ordered a slice of pie and a coffee. The waitress asked if I was waiting for someone. I said no. I used to say I had a son. That night, I just said no. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm for early spring. Sarah had invited a few of her friends over for what she called a garden mingle. I wasn't officially invited, but I showed up anyway, with a pie I'd baked that morning and a small hope that maybe, just maybe, I was still part of something. The backyard had changed. The roses Marjorie planted were gone, replaced by sculpted hedges and artificial turf, easier to maintain, Sarah once said. A long folding table sat in the middle, topped with sparkling water, wine spritzers, and tiny sandwiches that looked like they came out of a catalog. Bruno had his own chair. I stood at the edge of the patio, holding my pie, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. Matthew finally noticed and walked over with an awkward smile. Hey, Dad, he said. You didn't text. I brought apple pie, I said, forcing a smile. Homemade. He scratched his head. It's just, this crowd is more into vegan stuff. But thanks. I stood there for a moment, still holding the pie. Mind if I say hello to everyone? His eyes darted toward the group. It's just, Sarah's friends don't really know you. And Bruno gets really wound up with new people around. I looked over at the dog, lounging in the shade like royalty. I'm not new. Matthew hesitated. It's just not the best timing. That's when I realized, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even a friend dropping by. I was an intruder. I set the pie down on the side table and walked toward the group anyway. Hello, everyone, I said. I'm Matthew's father. They offered polite smiles, distracted nods. One woman whispered something to another, and they both looked away. Sarah stepped in quickly, wine glass in hand. "Oh. I didn't know you were coming. Bruno's been a little nervous today, so we're trying to keep things low-key." "I noticed," I said, glancing at the dog's seat. "Didn't realize he was the guest of honor." A few people laughed softly, unsure if I was joking. Sarah's smile tightened. "He's part of the family." I looked at Matthew. Waiting. Wanting him to say something, anything. He didn't. He just took a sip of his drink and looked down. And that was the moment I knew. Not guessed. Not feared. Knew. I didn't belong anymore. Later that day, I walked around the side of the house and found the shed door open. That shed used to be my sanctuary, a place where I kept tools, fixed broken things, planned weekend projects with my son. I peeked inside, not expecting anything. What I found nearly knocked the breath from me. There were storage boxes stacked in the corner, all labeled with black marker. Dad's junk. Old man tools. Stuff to donate. And there, on top of one box, was a small framed photo of me and Matthew, him at 6, missing a front tooth, me holding him after his first baseball game. The frame was cracked. It had been tossed in there carelessly, like trash. I picked it up slowly, tracing the edge of the broken glass. That photo had sat on the hallway table for years. I turned around, hands trembling, and walked back inside. They were all still laughing, drinking, petting the damn dog. I looked at my son and said, "You put my life in storage." He blinked. "What?" "In the shed. Boxes. Junk. Tools. Pictures. Like I died and no one told me." Matthew flushed red, glancing at the others. "Dad, now's not the time." "No, it is the time," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "That photo, Marjorie's photo, was under a leash. You threw away our memories like they meant nothing." People stopped talking. All eyes turned toward us. Matthew stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Don't do this here." I stared at him. "You're ashamed of me." He didn't deny it. Just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "It's not like that." Then what was it like? I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Drove home in silence. Left the pie behind. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the empty armchair where Marjorie used to knit. I pulled out the shoebox of notes Matthew wrote as a child. "You're the best dad. I want to be like you." I read them one by one. They didn't bring comfort. They felt like ghosts. A few days later, a neighbor, Linda, from across the street, came by to drop off some soup. "Heard what happened," she said gently. "One of Sarah's friends posted about it. Said you crashed the party." "Crashed?" I said, laughing bitterly. "I built the house." Linda touched my arm. "I know. We all know. But knowing didn't change anything. Matthew didn't call. Didn't text. Not even to apologize. A week passed. Then two. The silence wasn't an accident. They had made a decision, they were moving on. And I wasn't part of the picture anymore. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd stopped by on a weekday, unannounced, yes, but only because I'd baked banana bread and thought maybe, just maybe, that gesture still meant something. The car wasn't in the driveway, so I let myself into the backyard through the side gate. I figured I'd leave the loaf on the porch table and go. No need to bother anyone. Then I heard his voice. "Matthew." He was in the kitchen, on speakerphone, and I froze as soon as I heard the name he mentioned. "So if we start transferring the assets now, it'll avoid any messy probate later," he said. His tone wasn't rushed. It was calm, businesslike. A woman's voice, not Sarah's, replied. Is your father aware of this conversation? There was a pause. Not yet. We're trying to handle things delicately. He's declining a bit. Declining? I pressed closer to the wall, heart pounding. He forgets things, Matthew continued. Gets confused. Last week he showed up during a dog event and caused a scene. It's becoming harder to manage. I almost dropped the banana bread right there. He's not ill, the woman said cautiously. No, Matthew admitted. But it's only a matter of time. Sarah and I talked about it, we'd like to be proactive. If he needs a care facility later, we want to be ready. And frankly, Bruno gets really stressed when Dad's around. It's not good for him. That was when I stepped away. Quietly. Slowly. I left the bread on the porch, turned around, and walked back to my truck. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, both hands on the wheel, my jaw tight enough to ache. The betrayal wasn't loud or cruel. It was clean. Clinical. Like I was already fading in their minds. Like I was a problem to solve. That night, I pulled out Marjorie's old journals. She kept everything, every birthday card, every receipt from Matthew's early school fees. I read them for hours, as if they could anchor me to a time when I still mattered. He'll always need you, she once wrote, echoing what she'd said on her hospital bed. But more importantly, teach him how to respect where he came from. That's what stung most. Not the legal talk. Not even the implication that I was losing my mind. It was that I had given everything, my hands, my years, my peace, and somehow, I had raised a man who didn't remember where he came from. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail from a private elder care service. Not addressed to me, but mistakenly sent to my house. It had Matthew's name as the primary contact. A pamphlet fell out, a dignified next step for aging parents. They'd circled the memory care section. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at the paper until the ink seemed to blur. And I realized then, it wasn't just neglect anymore. It was a plan. A quiet removal. I thought about every moment he'd interrupted me. Every time he chose silence over defense. Every time Sarah called me sweet in that condescending tone. And I remembered the boxes in the shed labeled Dad's junk. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were preparing for it. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, holding Marjorie's photo, and I whispered, I'm sorry. I thought he'd turn out better. The next morning, I began watching. I didn't say much during my next few visits, but I paid attention. I saw how Sarah would conveniently bring up finances anytime Matthew mentioned me. I noticed how Bruno was always used as the excuse to shorten my stays. He gets anxious. He's having a rough day. He didn't sleep well last night. I used to believe the dog was the problem. Now I knew it was just the shield. The barrier between them and guilt. A few weeks later, I overheard Sarah speaking on the phone in the front yard. She didn't see me. I'd pulled up while she was pacing by the mailbox. He's got a decent pension and the house still in his name, she was saying. It's not like we're being greedy, we're just trying to secure the future. You know how expensive dog care is now. And if we're taking care of him too, it's only fair. Him. Not Dad. Not your father. Just a financial burden bundled with a dog. She turned and saw me then, startled. Oh. I didn't hear you pull up. Clearly, I said. She forced a smile. We were just talking about dog insurance. I nodded, walked inside, and said nothing. But that night, I took out a notepad and wrote everything down. Dates. Times. Quotes. Then I called David Soren, my old army buddy, now a retired estate attorney, and asked him to meet for lunch. Because if they wanted to prepare for the future, so would I. But not the way they expected. I didn't go over there for a confrontation. I just wanted answers. Clarity. Maybe even a chance, a final chance, for him to make it right before I did something I couldn't undo. It was a Tuesday evening. I knew they'd be home because it was Bruno's calming night, according to Sarah. No visitors. Low lights. Essential oils in a diffuser, for the dog's nerves. God forbid anyone disturb the prince. I rang the bell once. Matthew answered, already wearing that tight smile of his, the one that said he hoped this wouldn't take long. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Everything okay?" "No," I replied, stepping in past him. "We need to talk." Sarah was in the kitchen, stirring some kind of soup in a stainless steel pot. Bruno lay sprawled on the couch like a king on his throne. I stayed standing. "You planning on putting me in a home?" I asked. Silence. Sarah stiffened. Matthew looked at me, stunned. "Where's this coming from?" A pamphlet. A phone call. A conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. He sighed, as if I was being dramatic. "Dad, it's not what you think." "No?" "Then explain it to me. Explain why I'm being discussed like an old sofa you're trying to get rid of." Sarah chimed in. "It's not like that. We're just trying to be practical. You're not getting any younger, and it's—" "Don't," I said sharply, my voice cracking. "Don't pretend this is about care. This is about convenience." Bruno barked once, then settled back down. Matthew ran his hand through his hair. "Look, Dad, things have changed. We have routines, obligations. Bruno's, well, he's sensitive. Your visits stress him out. Your dog gets stressed. What about me? Have you once asked how I feel about being shut out of the house I built?" Matthew shook his head. "It's not like that. Stop saying that." I snapped. "Stop gaslighting me. You've been pushing me out for months. You've ignored my birthday, packed my memories into boxes, and now you're scheming behind my back." Sarah crossed her arms. "It's not scheming. It's preparing. It's what responsible adults do." I turned to Matthew. "Is this the man you've become? Cold, calculated, hiding behind your wife and your mutt while your father slowly disappears from your life?" He looked down. "You're twisting things." "No," I said. "I'm finally seeing them clearly." There was no shouting after that. Just a thick, awkward silence. I left without another word. Drove home. Sat in my chair until midnight with the TV on mute. The next day, I called David. We met at the cafe where we used to grab coffee before deployment drills, back when life was still about duty and brotherhood. He was older now, heavier around the middle, slower with his walk, but his mind was still sharp as a knife. "I need to rewrite my will," I told him. He raised an eyebrow. "Matthew? Gone." He gave a slow nod. "You sure about that?" "More than I've ever been about anything." We spent the afternoon going over everything, the house, the savings, the bonds Marjorie and I bought in the '80s, even the small pension from my time in the service. Then I made the decision. All of it goes to the Glenwood Animal Shelter. David blinked. "The one off 12th Street? I nodded. "They take care of the animals no one wants." Seemed fitting. "And Matthew?" I took a breath. "Removed entirely. Add a clause, if he contests the will, everything goes to a charity of the shelter's choice. He'll get nothing but a reminder." David stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "You know, this might be the most loving thing you could do. Not for him. For yourself." I left his office with a folder under my arm and a heaviness I didn't quite know how to carry. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was loss, written on paper and sealed with a notary stamp. Back at home, I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out a picture of Marjorie. I held it for a while. "Remember when we thought he'd be the one to take care of us?" I asked her. She didn't answer, of course. But something in her smile, that faint, familiar curve, gave me strength. The next morning, I began sorting my papers. I started writing letters. Making copies. Organizing. I wasn't scared of death. But I wanted it on my terms, not theirs. A few days later, Linda from across the street stopped by again. "Heard about your son," she said gently. "What now?" She hesitated. "He told someone at the post office that he's managing his father's transition and might be selling the house soon." "Yours?" I nodded. "Let him try." She smiled. "You've still got fight in you, I see." "No," I said. "Not fight. Just clarity." The office smelled like old paper and fresh ink, the kind of place where big decisions sit quietly in drawers, waiting to be read after someone's gone. David had cleared the afternoon for me. No other clients. Just us, the silence, and a long wooden table that had probably heard more goodbyes than weddings. "You sure about this?" he asked, as he opened the folder and placed the draft in front of me. I nodded. "I'm not doing it out of anger." "No," he said, "you're doing it out of something deeper. That's what makes it final." I looked at the pages. The words were clean, emotionless. Legal. Clinical. But I knew what they meant. Every paragraph was a declaration, not of revenge, but of release. The house, the land, the savings account, the old truck Matthew used to beg me to give him, all of it, now signed over to Glenwood Animal Shelter. Marjorie would have smiled at that. She always said if she'd had more time, she would have opened a rescue. She loved animals. Strays especially. Maybe because she knew what it felt like to be one. "There's one clause I want in bold," I said. "The contest clause." David nodded. "Already here. If Matthew or anyone connected to him tries to challenge this will, the entire estate goes to a secondary charity chosen by the shelter. No payout, no settlement." "Good," I said. "I want it airtight." He handed me a pen. I stared at it for a moment. Thought about that little boy with skin knees who used to fall asleep on my chest. The one who called me Super Dad when I fixed his broken toy car. The one who once said, "If I ever get rich, I'll buy you the biggest house in the world." I signed. David slid the paper away, stapled it, and reached for the notary seal. "It's done," he said. "Matthew has no legal claim to your estate anymore." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just exhaled, slow, long, like I'd been holding that breath for years. On the way home, I stopped by Glenwood. It wasn't fancy: chipped paint, chain-link fence, a handwritten sign on the gate that said, "Closed for cleaning, ring bell." I rang. A woman in her 40s, hair tied back in a messy bun, opened the door with a smile. "Can I help you?" "My name's Henry Walker," I said. "I just made you my sole beneficiary." She blinked, confused. "I'm sorry. I left everything to this place. When I'm gone. House. Money. Truck. It's all yours." She stared at me, stunned. "Why?" I looked around. Dogs barked softly in the back. A cat peeked from behind a stack of crates. The place smelled of disinfectant and old love. "Because my son replaced me with a dog," I said. "Figured it was time I did something for dogs who never had a father." Her eyes welled up. "We've been on the verge of shutting down," she whispered. You might have saved us." "I'm not trying to save anyone," I said. I'm just putting things back where they belong. She invited me in. Gave me a tour. Showed me the kennels, the broken heater, the leaky roof. Told me stories about animals who'd come and abused and left wagging their tails. I stayed for hours. I listened. I held an old beagle who wouldn't stop trembling until I scratched his ear. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt useful. I came back the next week. Brought tools. Fixed the broken hinge on the front gate. Then the week after that, I repaired 2 cages, tightened the leaky sink, replaced a light in the storage room. The woman, Rachel, her name was, started setting aside coffee for me. "The volunteers are calling you, Mr. Fix-It," she said once with a grin. I shrugged. Just an old man who remembers how to use a wrench. But it was more than that. I'd spent years trying to hold on to a family that didn't want me. Now I was spending time with animals and people who didn't expect anything from me, and yet they welcomed me anyway. Every time I walked through that gate, someone wagged their tail. Someone looked up and smiled. Someone needed me. Back home, I started cleaning out my things. Not in a bitter way, not with anger, but with purpose. I donated clothes. Boxed up old tools to bring to the shelter. Even wrote a letter to Matthew. Didn't send it. Just wrote it. "You were my world. I gave you everything I had. But I won't be an afterthought in my own story. I hope one day you'll understand." I sealed it and tucked it into the folder with my will. In the evenings, I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the sun set behind the oak tree. I didn't have much company. But I had peace. And that, I realized, was more than enough. I should have known it was coming, but hearing it out loud still knocked the wind from me. It was late October when Matthew called. The last time he'd called just to talk had been almost a year ago. But this time, there was no warmth, no hesitation. Just business in his voice. "Hey, Dad," he said, "we need to talk about the house." The house. Not your house, not the home. Just the house. "What about it?" I asked, even though I already knew. He sighed, like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Sarah and I have been looking into refinancing options. Interest rates are high, and we're trying to get a better deal. But the problem is, technically, your name is still on the title." "Because I never signed it over," I said flatly. "I know," he said. "But we were hoping, maybe you'd consider transferring it. Just so we can lock in the rates. Nothing changes for you, obviously." "Of course not," I said. "Except I'd no longer own the house I built." He paused. "You don't really live here anymore, Dad." There it was. The thing he'd been circling for months. He finally said it. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I just visit. Uninvited. In between dog schedules." "Dad." I cut him off. "Is this about getting rid of me, or is this just another step in the plan?" There was silence on the other end. "I heard you and Sarah talking," I continued. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" "It's not like that," he said quickly, but there was no conviction in his voice. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was all so predictable. "You want the house. The title. The money. You've already boxed up my life, Matthew. Now you want to put the last nail in it." He started to protest, but I hung up. The next day, I pulled out the file folder with the new will. Double-checked every signature, every clause. Made 3 copies, one for my lawyer, one for the shelter, and one to carry in my glove compartment. That weekend, I got an email from Sarah. It was short. Cold. Efficient. "Given the recent tensions and the sensitive nature of Bruno's anxiety, we feel it would be best if you refrained from dropping by unannounced. We'd be happy to schedule visits, preferably in neutral locations, for everyone's comfort. Everyone's comfort. Not Matthew's. Not ours. Everyone's. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Then I clicked print. The paper sat on my dining table for 2 days before I folded it and added it to my file. That was when I knew I had to do something. Not out of spite. Not even out of sadness. But out of truth. I was done waiting for them to change. So I planned my next visit. Not just to drop by. But to make sure they understood, really understood, what they'd done. I gathered everything, copies of the will, dated notes, the email, the letter I'd written but never sent. I packed them in a manila envelope and sealed it shut. Then I put on my best jacket. The one Marjorie always said made me look too handsome to be a carpenter. I hadn't worn it in years. And I went to their house. It was a Sunday afternoon, same as the day they had that garden party. Cars lined the driveway. Another gathering, it seemed. Bruno barked inside. The front door was cracked open. I knocked. Sarah answered, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it with a strained smile. "Henry," she said. "We weren't expecting." "I'm not here to stay," I said. "I just came to deliver something." Matthew appeared behind her, holding a beer. He looked tired. Or maybe just caught. "Dad." I handed him the envelope. "This is my legacy. Everything I've built. Every dollar. Every piece of land. Every tool, every bond. It's all in there." He looked at it but didn't take it. "What is this?" he asked. "I rewrote my will," I said. "You're not in it anymore." Sarah blinked. "Wait, what?" "It's going to Glenwood Animal Shelter," I said. "The whole estate. House, savings, everything. If you try to contest it, the money goes elsewhere, away from the shelter too." Matthew's mouth opened, then closed. Like he was waiting for the punchline. "You said I didn't live here anymore," I continued. "You made it clear. So now you don't have to worry about my future. You don't have to manage me. You don't have to lie to lawyers or prepare Bruno for my visits. I'm handling it." "Dad, this is insane," Matthew said, his voice rising. "You're overreacting." "No," I said, my voice calm. "I'm responding." I handed him the envelope. He took it this time. Then I looked around, at the house I built, the walls I painted, the soil where Marjorie's rose bushes once grew. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. "And you made me feel like a burden. Like a stranger. Like noise." I looked at Sarah. "He wasn't like this before. You should have known that." Then I turned to Matthew. "Goodbye, son." I left before he could respond. Drove home. Parked the truck. Walked inside. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly. Because the manila envelope was no longer in my drawer. It was exactly where it needed to be. It was Matthew's birthday. He was turning 40, a milestone. I hadn't been invited to the party, but word gets around in a small town. Linda mentioned it in passing while handing me my mail. "Big celebration at your son's place this weekend. Must be nice, huh?" I just nodded. She didn't know. They were throwing it at the local lodge, a fancy place on the edge of town, the kind of venue with string lights, buffet tables, and a DJ who played too loud for anyone over 50. I knew the place. I helped install the back deck years ago, when it was still a rickety old event hall. I told myself I wasn't going. That showing up would be dramatic, petty. That I'd already made my statement. But when Saturday came, and I saw the lodge parking lot full of SUVs, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, clarity. This wasn't about making a scene. It was about truth. I parked across the street. Took a deep breath. Then walked through the doors like I belonged there, because, once upon a time, I did. The music was low, people were mingling, laughing, sipping from plastic champagne flutes. I spotted Sarah first, in a white dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly pension. She saw me, and her expression dropped for half a second before snapping back into that thin smile. "Henry," she said, moving toward me. "What a surprise. Is it?" I asked calmly. Matthew appeared beside her, drink in hand. "Dad. You should have called." "No, I shouldn't have," I replied. "You made it clear that phone calls are for scheduled visits and dog updates." A few guests turned to look. Matthew glanced around, trying to lower his voice. "This really isn't the place." "No," I said. "This is exactly the place." I pulled out the envelope, a fresh one, with another full copy of the will, notarized, time-stamped, and initialed by me. "I came here to make sure you understood. Because the last time I dropped this off, I'm not sure the message landed." Matthew's eyes darted between me and the envelope. "Dad, we don't need to do this." "Let me ask you something," I said, stepping forward, my voice calm but loud enough for the nearest 10 people to hear. "How many people here know you tried to have me declared mentally unfit?" His jaw tightened. "Dad. How many know you've been calling lawyers behind my back, pushing me toward a nursing home, boxing up my belongings while pretending it was for my comfort?" People were staring now. Conversation stopped. Even the DJ turned the volume down. "I gave you everything," I said. "The house. My time. My life. I did it with love. But somewhere along the way, you decided a dog's discomfort was more important than your father's dignity." Matthew's face flushed red. Sarah tugged on his arm, whispering something, but he ignored her. I turned to the crowd. "I'm not here for pity," I said. "I'm not here to ruin a birthday. I'm here to say this: I'm still alive. I'm still lucid. And I'm still in control." I held up the envelope. "This is my will. My final version. Everything I own, my estate, savings, house, goes to Glenwood Animal Shelter. Not to my son. Not to anyone who treated me like a burden. And if anyone contests this, the money goes to charity, no exceptions." The room was frozen. Eyes wide. Mouths half open. Matthew stepped forward finally, trying to speak. "Dad, you don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand what love is supposed to look like. What respect feels like. And I haven't seen it in your eyes in a long time." I laid the envelope on the gift table, right between 2 wrapped boxes. Then I looked at him one last time. "I used to tell you bedtime stories," I said. "About being brave. About telling the truth, even when it was hard. I guess I finally took my own advice." Then I turned and walked out. No one followed. Outside, the sun was setting behind the hills, casting everything in gold. The air was quiet, except for the music fading behind me. I got into my truck, turned the key, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because I'd won. Not because I'd hurt him. But because I'd stood up for myself. For once, I wasn't just someone's father. I was a man who remembered his worth. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. After the confrontation at the lodge, the silence was louder than any argument could have been. No calls. No emails. No knocks at the door. Just quiet, thick, uncomfortable, but not unwelcome. I sat in my old armchair the next morning, coffee in hand, staring at the same window I'd looked out of for over 40 years. The tree in the front yard had turned gold. Marjorie loved that tree. Every fall she'd press one of its leaves into a book, whispering something poetic about seasons and change. I always thought she was too sentimental. Now I get it. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I'd expected fallout, maybe even a scene. But instead, I got nothing. And there was something strangely peaceful about that. In town, I could feel the shift. I'd become a story, a whisper. Did you hear what Henry did at the lodge? He left everything to the animal shelter, can you believe it? Some nodded with approval. Some shook their heads. Most didn't know the whole truth. But that didn't matter. I wasn't looking for sympathy. One afternoon at the grocery store, a man I didn't know well, Pete, I think, gave me a firm pat on the back. Took guts, he said. Too many of us just take it and fade out. I nodded. That was all. No need for a speech. The house was quiet these days, but I didn't mind it. I'd grown used to it over the years, ever since Matthew moved out, really. I did the things I always used to do but never had time to savor. I sat on the porch with black coffee. I listened to the birds, to the wind tapping branches against the window. Sometimes, I'd talk to Marjorie. Just a few words. A thank you. Did you see that, when a squirrel dashed across the yard? And I kept busy. The Glenwood shelter had become more than just a future inheritance. It was a lifeline. I started going twice a week, then 3 times. Fixed shelves. Repaired the fence. Painted over the chipped corners of the welcome desk. I brought old blankets, my toolbox, even some of Marjorie's quilts. She'd have loved knowing a shivering pup was curled up under something she made. The dogs didn't judge. They didn't talk over me or tell me I was too sensitive. They just wagged their tails and leaned into my hand like they knew I needed something to hold on to. Rachel, the shelter director, started leaving tasks on a clipboard for me. Only if you feel like it, she'd write at the bottom, every time. I always felt like it. We'd talk sometimes after closing. She told me how she started the shelter with her late brother's insurance payout. How she never married, too busy patching up paws and chasing down strays. One night, as we locked up, she looked at me and said, "You've got kind hands." It hit harder than it should have. I hadn't heard a compliment in years that wasn't followed by a request or an obligation. "Thanks," I said quietly. She smiled. "No dog ever shied away from you. That says something." At home, the mail kept coming, but not from Matthew. The bills, the junk, the occasional ad for a stair lift I didn't need, but nothing from him. Nothing from Sarah. And I was okay with that. Because somewhere along the silence, I stopped waiting for them to fix it. They wouldn't. And maybe that's the lesson nobody tells you about being a parent: you can give your best, love the hardest, and still end up forgotten. But that doesn't make your love worthless. It makes it real. One afternoon, as I raked the yard, a small voice called from behind the fence. "Grandpa?" I turned. It was Lily, my granddaughter. Matthew's girl. 8 years old, with wild brown curls and that same curious tilt of the head Marjorie used to have. She stood there holding the fence post, uncertain. "Your dad know you're here?" I asked. She shook her head. "Your mom?" Another shake. "You came on your own?" She nodded. I dropped the rake and walked over. She looked up at me, biting her lip. "Can I pet the kittens again? From the place with the dogs?" I smiled before I realized it. "Of course." She reached through the slats in the fence and slipped her tiny hand into mine. I didn't ask her why she came. I didn't need to. Sometimes, love finds its own way home. After Lily's visit, something shifted in me. Not because I thought Matthew had come around, I knew better by then, but because of the way her small hand fit into mine, like it belonged there. Like it remembered. She showed up again the next week. This time with a juice box in her backpack and a folded drawing of a puppy and a man with gray hair. "It's you," she said, tapping the stick figure. "I drew your nose too big though." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Rachel let her help clean the kitten pens. Gave her a child-sized pair of gloves. By the end of the hour, Lily's cheeks were pink and her eyes were glowing. "They like me," she said, breathless. "They don't even know me, and they like me. They just know how to feel," I told her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what would happen to Glenwood if something went wrong. If the funding dried up. If the town cut support. My money might help after I'm gone, but what about before? I found myself at the dining table, drawing sketches on the back of a grocery list. The layout of my house. The guest rooms. The basement. The backyard. There was so much space. So much wasted space. Marjorie used to call it our forever house. She wanted it full, not of things, but of people. Laughter. Life. She dreamed of foster kids, exchange students, family dinners every Sunday. But life had other plans. Maybe it wasn't too late. The next day, I asked Rachel, "Has Glenwood ever thought about expanding? Maybe opening a satellite space? Something small, quiet. For older dogs. For dogs that don't do well in shelters." She blinked. "Every day. But we don't have the space. Or staff. Or money. What if I offered all three?" I said. She stared at me, speechless. "My house is just sitting there. I've got 3 rooms I barely use. A finished basement. A fenced yard. And 2 hands that still work most days." "You're serious?" As a heart attack. Within a week, we'd drafted a plan. I'd convert the garage into an insulated dog room. Build sleeping cubbies with bedding. Install a small ramp off the back porch for older dogs with bad legs. I'd take on 1 or 2 at first. Then maybe more. Rachel called it a retirement home for rescues. I called it Marjorie's dream. I got to work immediately. I hadn't touched my toolbox in a while, but the rhythm came back quickly. Sanding. Measuring. Drilling. My body ached in new ways, but I welcomed it. Pain meant progress. Word spread around town, slowly but warmly. A few old friends dropped by to help. Linda brought lemonade and some extra towels she'd kept from her own dogs last year's. A retired vet offered discounted checkups for any animal I housed. Even the hardware store gave me a quiet discount, for the good work, the clerk said with a nod. And Lily kept coming. Every Saturday, like clockwork. Sometimes with Sarah's blessing, sometimes quietly. She never spoke about her parents, and I didn't press. We just worked. She painted signs with Rachel, filled food bowls, and memorized the names of every dog that came through the door. She started calling it Marjorie's house, even though she never met her grandmother. Said it felt like a soft place, like someone kind had touched the walls. I teared up when she said that. Rachel teared up too. One evening, after we finished setting up the new cubbies, Rachel handed me a small wooden plaque. Hand-carved. The lettering simple but warm. Marjorie's house, where old dogs rest and broken hearts mend. I ran my hand over the letters. She'd like that, I whispered. You brought something back here, Henry, Rachel said. Not just to the dogs. To us. To yourself. I nodded. I think I finally stopped waiting for something to change. And I started changing it myself. That night, I sat on the porch and looked out over the yard, where an old shepherd mix named Benny snored peacefully under the stars. The porch light buzzed quietly, the wind rustled through the leaves, and for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. I wasn't wondering what I'd done wrong. I wasn't hoping to be needed. I was. Marjorie's house didn't take long to come alive. The first to arrive was Benny, the old shepherd mix with cloudy eyes and a limp that made you wince just watching him walk. Then came Daisy, a deaf spaniel who barked at shadows but curled up like a baby when you scratched behind her ears. I didn't expect company. I figured I'd be the caretaker, the old man with the tools and the bowls and the quiet, creaky patience. But company came anyway. One afternoon, Rachel sent over 2 teenagers from the high school's volunteer program, punishment, I assumed, for something minor and stupid. But they showed up with sheepish grins and a surprising gentleness. They cleaned out the dog beds, replaced water bowls, asked questions about the tools I used. I told them stories while we worked, about Marjorie, about fixing broken window frames in the rain, about my time in the army, even about Matthew when he was a boy and still called me Papa. They listened. Not out of obligation. Out of interest. They started coming back on their own. Then Linda's grandson, a shy, soft-spoken boy who didn't say much but sat with Daisy for hours, just brushing her gently while she snored. Then Pete, the guy from the grocery store, stopped by to donate old lumber and ended up staying 3 hours to help rebuild the backyard fence. And Lily, of course. She became part of the rhythm. She called the dogs her furry cousins, and insisted they each get bedtime belly rubs. She painted nameplates for every kennel. Nook. Her favorites were Benny and an anxious terrier named Scooter who refused to be alone, so she'd sit with him, reading out loud from comic books until he fell asleep. She brought warmth I hadn't felt in years. No questions, no judgment. Just light. Sometimes she'd stay late, helping me wash the floors or restock food. And in those quiet moments, when the dogs were full and the dishes were done, she'd ask the things no one else dared. Do you miss Daddy? I didn't lie. I miss who he used to be. Will you ever be friends again? I don't know, honey. But sometimes, love doesn't mean going back. It means letting go without hate. She nodded like she understood. I think she did. One night, after she fell asleep on the couch next to Benny, I found myself looking around the living room. There were blankets everywhere. Dog beds tucked neatly into corners. The smell of dog shampoo and old pine floors. A picture of Marjorie on the mantel, and a new one next to it, Lily, holding Scooter, both of them grinning like fools. The house wasn't quiet anymore. It was alive. Not because blood filled it, but because kindness did. Loyalty. Purpose. I got a letter from Matthew the next week. It was short. Cold. I hear you've made your choice. I hope you enjoy your animals. Don't expect us at Christmas. I folded it, put it in the drawer with the others. Then I took a walk outside, sat with Benny, and fed him bits of cooked chicken from my pocket. His tail thumped weakly against the porch step. That was all the reply I needed. Later, Rachel dropped by with some old files. She'd officially registered Marjorie's house as a satellite program under Glenwood Shelter. Said the paperwork was a formality, but the sentiment was real. You've built something rare here, she told me. It's not just dogs who come to heal. It's people, too. She wasn't wrong. One morning, I found Linda sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and brushing out Daisy's tangled ears. She looked up and said, "You know what I love about this place? Nobody here pretends." She was right. No one wore masks. No one played roles. There were no titles. No power games. Just gentle tasks. Shared silences. A respect that wasn't earned by blood, but by effort. And for the first time in my life, I understood something Marjorie used to say when people let her down: family isn't who shares your table on holidays, it's who carries your name in how they treat others. My blood family had turned away. But my real family? They were all around me, wagging tails, scraped knees, paint-streaked hands, quiet smiles. People who remembered me. Who saw me. And that, I realized, was more than enough. It was early spring when I saw him again. I was outside, hosing down the back porch where Benny had tracked in mud, when I heard the car pull up. Not Rachel's. Not a volunteer. Not the postal truck or Linda's rickety hatchback. It was Matthew's SUV. I didn't stop what I was doing. Just kept hosing, slow and steady, like I hadn't noticed him stepping out of the car in his spotless jacket and polished shoes, holding nothing in his hands. I turned off the water. He walked up the path, slower than usual, his shoulders hunched slightly like the weight of something finally caught up to him. "Dad," he said quietly. I nodded. "Matthew." We stood in silence. The house behind me was alive, barking in the distance, the rattle of a food bowl, laughter from inside where the kids were refilling water jugs. Lily's voice floated faintly through the open window. Matthew glanced around. "So this is it, huh? This is it." He looked down at the porch, at the fresh paint and handmade wooden sign Rachel and I had nailed up last week. His eyes lingered on the words. "Marjorie's house, where old dogs rest and broken hearts mend. You kept her name on it," he said. "She never stopped being part of it." He nodded once. Hands in his pockets. Eyes still scanning the space like he didn't quite know what he was looking for. "I got your letter," he said after a while. "I figured." I didn't know what to say. "You didn't have to say anything." He was quiet again. Then, "Lily's been coming here. Sarah's furious. She hasn't missed a Saturday in over a month," I said. "She's got a good heart." Matthew swallowed hard. "She says this is the only place she feels safe being quiet." That hit deeper than it should have. "I didn't come to fight," he added. "I didn't think you did." He walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the backyard, where Daisy was chasing a tennis ball that wasn't hers, barking with a joy that made her sound young again. A teenage boy, one of the volunteers, was laughing, trying to keep up with her. "I don't recognize this version of you," he said softly. "I think this is the version," I replied. "The one I had to become when I let go of hoping you'd see me again." He flinched, just barely. "I wasn't trying to erase you." "No," I said. "You were trying to organize your life. Fit me where I wouldn't make noise. Where the dog wouldn't bark. Where your wife wouldn't frown. I thought I was doing the right thing. And I thought I raised a man who knew what love looked like." Silence again. Then he turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said. "I'm not here for money or changes. I know it's too late for most things." "It is," I said. He nodded. He hesitated, then looked me in the eyes. "I just wanted to see what you built. With your hands. Without me." I considered that. Then stepped aside. He walked past me and into the house. I didn't follow right away. I heard the familiar creak of the floorboards, the murmur of voices, and Lily's sudden laugh when she spotted him. "Daddy," she called out. He responded quietly. I didn't catch the words. When I finally stepped inside, I found him standing in the main room, surrounded by dogs, volunteers, photos, and a soft golden light that made the place feel more like a memory than a shelter. He turned toward me, holding a framed picture of Marjorie. "She'd have liked this," he said. "She's the reason it exists." He nodded again. Then, to my surprise, he walked over and placed the photo back on the mantel. Carefully. Gently. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I don't have it to give, I replied. But I don't have hate either. He looked relieved and disappointed all at once. I should go, he said. Probably. He walked to the door. Then stopped. I do miss you, he said. More than I realized. I didn't reply right away. Just watched him. Then said, that's between you and time, Matthew. Not me. He stood there, nodded one last time, and left. When the door closed, I looked around at the people who had become my family, not by blood, but by kindness, by choice. I exhaled slowly. Then picked up a leash. Benny needed his walk. Speech balloon. Would you have forgiven the son? Share your thoughts below. The grand opening wasn't flashy. No ribbon cutting, no stage, no speeches longer than a few sentences. Just a sunny Saturday, folding chairs on the lawn, and people who knew what this place had become, and what it meant. Rachel made a sign from repurposed barn wood. Carved by hand. It read simply. Marjorie's House. EST 2025, a home for the forgotten, made by one who remembered. There were about 30 people there. A handful of neighbors. Shelter volunteers. A few retired vets I'd served with decades ago. Linda brought her famous peach cobbler. Lily made name tags for every guest, even the dogs. Benny, head of security, hers said. Daisy wore a bow. Scooter refused to leave Lily's side. We gave tours, showed off the insulated dog cubbies, the new heating vents, the outdoor ramp for older dogs. People smiled, asked questions, offered donations. But the moment that stuck with me was simpler. An older man in a wheelchair, someone I didn't know well, rolled up to me during the lunch hour, balancing a plate of potato salad on his lap. He looked around the yard, then said, I haven't seen this much kindness in one place in a long time. I didn't know what to say. So I just said, it took me losing a lot to make space for it. He nodded slowly. Sometimes that's the cost of clarity. I think he understood more than most. That afternoon, after the guests had gone and the last folding chair was packed away, I stood alone at the back of the house, watching the wind move through the tall grass. Rachel came up beside me. You did it, she said. No, I replied. We did it. She smiled. Marjorie would have been proud. She'd have cried, I said. Then yelled at me for taking so long. We both laughed. Inside, Lily was curled up on the couch with Benny. They were watching an old VHS tape, one of Matthew's birthday parties from when he was 6. Marjorie had filmed it. Her voice was on the tape, soft and bright, narrating the chaos of balloons and icing and a boy trying to blow out candles. I couldn't step inside for a moment. I just stood there in the doorway, listening to her voice fill the room again. Lily turned and saw me. Grandma was funny, she said. She called the cake lopsided but loved. She always said the best things were, I replied. And I believed it. Because this house, this place, wasn't perfect. The floors still creaked. The paint chipped faster than I could touch it up. Some nights the dogs barked until 2 a.m., and I'd lay awake wondering what version of my life I'd landed in. But every inch of it was filled with meaning. And love. Not the clean, polished kind. But the lopsided kind. The kind that makes space for second chances. As the sun began to dip, I stepped out onto the front lawn. The light hit the wooden sign just right, warm, golden, steady. I looked up at the sky. I hope you're watching, I whispered. I hope you see what your name means here. I didn't expect a response. But a breeze came then, soft, cool, passing through the trees like a sigh. I closed my eyes and let it settle over me. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, I sat on the porch alone with a glass of sweet tea and a photo album in my lap. I turned the pages slowly: birthdays, fishing trips, holidays, smiles long gone and laughter I could almost hear. I paused on a photo of young Matthew, sitting on my shoulders, holding a toy hammer, his face lit up with joy. "I did the best I could," I said softly. "I really did." There was no reply. But I felt at peace with that. Because Marjorie's house wasn't built to undo what was broken. It was built to honor what mattered. And somehow, in its walls and its warmth, I'd found something more powerful than reconciliation. I'd found purpose. Real family doesn't always come from blood. It comes from choice. From people, and animals, who stay. Who show up. Who listen. As I stood to go inside, Benny limped up beside me, his tail thumping once against my leg. I scratched his ear. "Come on, boy," I said. "Let's go home." And we walked in together, into the noise, into the love, into the lopsided but lasting kind of peace.